Hey all, we are going to be taking night scene photos. These are so fun to take. Yes, you have to stay up late and get out there at just the right time to take these, but they are a lot of fun to see what your results might be. I love taking photos with the night scenes because the light is so fun to play with and there's so many options. A night scene is a landscape photo without a lot of light in it. Of course, you have to have some light from somewhere. Most often it's the lights from a city at night, but you can even be, out just camping and it be the light from the sunset or the light from the moon, and be able to get really cool photos. The night scene mode. Now, this is a photo I took of my point and shoot that you've seen that I have, and I don't have any night scene modes on my manual, but I do have this on my point and shoot, and there are two here. The one in the yellow is, I should have done this the other way around and had the first one be active, but when the first one's active on mine, then I can't see this one. So there are two. The night portrait, which is in yellow, and that is not one that we're going to be using with this lesson. It has most of the time just a star with a person next to it, not a star and a moon, but this one has a star and a moon, but they are all similar. But that night portrait one is going to be our next lesson. You want to look for one that has a star and the little mountain for landscape. There are two night modes out there in general on not phones. Could be on your phone with the smartphones out there. On your camera, on your point and shoot cameras, one is with a flash and one is without. Now the night portrait is going to flash, so you can, if you don't know the difference between the two, if you can't tell by your icons or whatever, just take a photo, and if it flashes, it may not work very well with this lesson. Just don't use it. Find a different mode that is a long exposure but doesn't flash, such as this camera also has a fireworks setting, and it works similar to this landscape one where it's just a long exposure. I'm sure it's a different long exposure than this one. So find the one that does not flash, and it's the one with the star and the little mountains most of the time. Night portrait, as I said, will be the next lesson, which is the same but with subjects in the foreground. So we don't want any subjects in the foreground this round. We want just landscape photos. Minimize camera shake. Now, we've learned this in the past lesson already. Methods we've learned are to use a tripod, so you're going to want to use a tripod. The mirror lockup, you'll remember we did that, I think it was with the maybe the macro lesson, when we were real close up and we learned how to get the mirror to stay up so it didn't cause camera shake, and a timer for delay. Now the mirror lockup, that's only in your DSLRs, but the timer for delay may be in your point and shoot, and of course tripod can be used with any camera. ISO. ISO is a consideration for night photography, but we haven't learned it yet. And we're going to learn it in in another lesson fairly soon, and it's really hard to decide how to order all these lessons, but we're focusing right now on lessons about shutter speed and learning shutter speed. So just for now, use a low ISO of 100 or 200 for this lesson, or a default on your camera. Shutter priority mode. So as we said, this lesson we're focusing on learning shutter speeds. For night photography, the shutter needs to be open for a longer period of time so it will allow in more light. We're at night. If your camera goes too fast, it's not going to allow in enough light, and you're not going to be able to see what you're taking a photo of. So you need to leave the shutter open a lot longer to let in more light. Therefore, use that TV mode on your camera that we learned in just the previous lesson about shutter speed. This is for your DSLRs. Of course, if you have a point and shoot, you look for those manual modes that we just talked about. Use the shutter priority mode, which is the TV on your camera, to allow the camera to choose the aperture. You get to choose how long to keep the shutter speed open. It will choose the aperture. You can use from 0.5 seconds to 6 whole seconds to 30 seconds. It all depends on light and movement. So, you know, I am not going to be able to tell you how many seconds that your particular setting is going to require and what you're going for, and we're going to see a few examples of this. So be prepared to sit down and take lots of photos when you do this, and you'll get better learning your camera and your settings as time goes on. But for this lesson, be prepared to sit there for a while and play. It's really fun to play. You're just going to test and adjust your camera, test and adjust until you get a better understanding and what you're going for. But even if you're just out there and you've done this for a while, you often have to just take a photo and test it and see what it looks like, and then you're going to know where to adjust your photo or your shutter speed up or down for what you're going for. So here's an example of a somewhat slow shutter speed. It's not a fast shutter speed, but we're working on the slow shutter speed so that it stays open a long time. So this is a somewhat slow one, but not a really, really slow one. This is downtown Cape Girardeau. I went down there with my with the Big Brother Big Sister program, and he had my point and shoot and I had my DSLR, and we had a blast. we went down there though purposefully trying to get streaks in photos, and he had high success with my point and shoot. So I know you could do this lesson. I know you can. And so this photo is just a normal, nice nighttime photo. The sky is very blue because we're down there at the blue hour. We're gonna do that as a fun lesson in the at the end after we learn about camera basics. But nice blue, which really makes this pop with the lights kind of turning yellow. The shutter speed on this one was a half a second. Of course, if it were a little bit darker, a couple hours later, with the moon in a different position, I may have needed to be, just a slightly faster shutter speed. It all depends on how much light you have. If there were fewer street lights, or the street lights were further away, or there were no street lights, it might be a different exposure. So it all depends on your setting that you're taking a picture of. Now, here's the same setting but it's at 1.6 seconds. Now you can see I accidentally got a car going down through there. There's a little bit of a streak right here. I would have preferred this photo to not have that, but a car happened to go by, and sometimes you have to sit there for a long time and wait for cars to not go by. But the difference that I want to point out to you are the lights. You can see with the 1.6 seconds, the lights are getting these little star shapes coming out of them. So if that's the effect you're going for, you would take your test shot and then maybe make it even a little bit slower to see, and then maybe do another one to see if the lights have even more of a flare coming from them. If you don't want that flare and you want the, like our previous photo where you don't have any of that and it looks more realistic, then you're going to want to speed it up again, lower that shutter speed so it doesn't stay open so long, because the longer it stays open, the more your lights are going to do like this. And here it is at 25 seconds, and you can see I'm losing my blue hour. It's getting darker blue in the sky, and we're a little bit further down the street, but you can see what 25 whole seconds does and how far out the lights are doing their little glare thing, which is really cool if that's what you're going for. If I did this in my camera and I was going for a more realistic look, as I said, I'm gonna be changing my shutter speed. Test and adjust for what you want. Do it yourself. It's best if you use manual focus. So you can use the other, it's okay. You can use the automatic, but try to get off and on manual focus. Of course, if your camera's doing the focusing, that's going to take up seconds and maybe make camera shake too. It may focus on the wrong thing, especially if a car happens to go by and it starts to suddenly focus on that rather than the bridge in the background, or it's just best to use manual focus. Play with exposure compensation. We've already learned about exposure compensation. You should be getting really good at it by now. If you are on a point and shoot camera, you may not be able to do exposure compensation with your night scene mode, but if you are in your DSLR camera, certainly play with exposure compensation, because your camera may meter off of the lights that are there, but you can really affect that by using your exposure compensation. So when you're testing and readjusting, test and adjust, be adjusting that exposure compensation also and testing it. And get used to a dark preview. I did live mode a lot, and sometimes I could see nothing in my live mode, and so I had to guess where to frame my photo, and then when it wasn't right in the end results, I had to, I have it on my tripod, so I just had to move a slight move and readjust it. So that's why this takes a long time. Of course, if you're looking through without live mode and just looking through your viewfinder, it's going to all look dark sometimes, so get used to that. Is the moon low in the sky or straight overhead? A low moon would create really long shadows, like spooky, like in the forest with the trees and the long shadows. This may be the effect that you're going for. If it's not the effect you're going for, you might want to wait a couple hours and come back. Is the moon covered by clouds? If so, you may have to try another evening. Unless you're out camping and you just can't try another evening. But if you're serious about getting a certain type of shot, you may have to come back. You have to wait for the perfect circumstances sometimes to get that one cool night shot. But that's what's so fun about playing with these night photos. Professional photographers love playing with them because what we're doing is playing with light. I know that you've heard that phrase before. And they call him a streak. I can't sing, but that's a great song. And they go, what's it go? Boobity bobbity bobbity bobbity. I don't know. I get that in my head. What if the lights are moving? You get streaks, such as the cars might move or Ferris wheels might move. Those are the most common lights that we see that we are moving, that we see in night photography. But there could be other things moving. Or you can create movement by moving the camera. Now, when I was down there with my little, as I said, and he was there with my point and shoot, he actually got really good at just moving the camera a little bit to make those streaks with the cars be a little bit more intense. And so, yes, use a tripod, but sometimes it's fun to use a somewhat slow shutter speed and move the camera itself and see what you get, because man, he had a blast. So remember, we're using a tripod most of the time, but sometimes it's okay to move the camera on purpose. The slowest shutter speeds, so that's when we get these streaks. So here's a car or a couple of cars. I think it was actually one car going down the street, and there was actually, you could see over here, some red light going this way. I'm at an intersection, so I have cars coming down the street and I have cars coming across in front of me, and I actually think a car came across in front of me here too. And so this shutter speed was 30 whole seconds. That's about the fastest my camera will go unless I go on to bulb mode. Don't forget that bulb mode is there if you're using a DSLR, because that could also create even more fun. But I found I could use this 30 seconds a lot. 25-30 seconds to get these. Of course, look at the stars on the lights, the flares on the lights. But that is a streak. And here is another example of the streak. And in this one, I had multiple cars go in front of me, so you see I've got light coming this way and this way because I had cars coming in both directions. So it created a whole new effect, and this was 13 seconds. So you can see, I think these were taken similar times. The sky actually got darker. The whole thing got a little bit darker when I used the 13 seconds over the 30 seconds. So, which creates a whole different mood to this photo. So it all depends on what you're going for and what happens to come by. Be brave and go manual. I will tell you, when I was playing with this for the first time in doing all of these lessons, I felt encouraged and pulled to go on to the manual mode because I wanted to get different apertures. You remember, the aperture also affects how much light comes in, and so I was wanting to get certain effects by having very long shutter speed to get the streaks of light, but I was getting in too much light because the aperture was adjusting, and then the photos were getting all blown out. And so I was able to move my aperture down to affect how much light came in that way in the hole. And it's also, though, good to try to get sharp photos. Remember, f11 or greater, because you don't want to get, I mean, you may want to get that shallow depth of field look, not generally in our landscape photos though. You would want to get that shallow in your night portrait, which is what we would do next. So in the next lesson. So try to keep those photos sharp if you do go manual. HDR. Remember, we've learned HDR skills already, so use those for some dramatic photos. If you got some Photoshop skills to merge 2 photos or 3 photos when for instance, long exposures blow out signs such as this. This whole photo is straight from the camera except for the sign. The sign got blown out. You couldn't read what it was. So I took another photo on a regular setting and the whole thing was black except for the sign. I extracted it and put it on here so we could read the sign. And so use your Photoshop skills. Think when you're out there of other photos that you might want to get. And that's the end of this lesson. I am excited to see your night photos. They are so much fun. So go out there and have some fun.